Are you ready for the shocking truth about what the luxurious Victorian era actually smelled like? We're used to seeing impeccable ladies on screen, but behind the opulent facades of palaces and wealthy mansions lay a completely different everyday reality, one incredibly far removed from modern standards of cleanliness. You'll be surprised, but what is considered basic hygiene today would have been called madness in the 19th century. Women of that time performed the most complex and at times downright strange rituals every day just to maintain the illusion of freshness. Their methods of caring for their bodies, hair, and clothing seem not just frightening today, but physically exhausting. Imagine a life where every step towards supposed cleanliness is an hour-long battle against the elements. But what deadly danger awaited those who tried to smell royal? Watch this video all the way to the end, and you'll learn what the true and sometimes bloody price was for creating the image of the ideal lady in a world without running water, deodorants, or the soap we're used to. The authors will show you the dark side of Victorian beauty and reveal the secret behind a perfumery trick that would send shivers down the spine of anyone today. You definitely won't want to miss these details.
Thank you, sir. Good evening.
I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of the hidden lives of 19th century women. Every morning for a Victorian lady began not with a warm shower, but with a Spartan washing with cold water. A small jug and a basin were brought into the bedroom, serving as the main tools for cleansing the body. The maid would prepare thick sponges and pieces of coarse cloth for drying in advance. A woman had to manage to freshen up before the room became too cold. This process required incredible discipline and patience every single day. Taking a full bath was considered dangerous for a woman's body and was practiced extremely rarely. Doctors of the time claimed that hot water opened the pores and allowed dangerous miasmas to enter the body. Therefore, ladies limited themselves to merely wiping down exposed areas of skin. They wiped their faces, necks, and hands with a damp sponge, taking care not to get their hair or clothes wet. The water was often literally freezing, especially during the winter months when bedrooms had no heating. They used hard soap for washing, which severely dried out and tightened the skin. It often contained harsh alkali, leaving an unpleasant sensation on the face. Women tried to use soap as infrequently as possible, replacing it with various oils and herbal infusions. Cleansing the skin involved mechanical rubbing, which removed the top layer of dirt. After washing, the face was always wiped with a dry towel until a slight blush appeared. Interestingly, washing the entire body was permitted only before important events, such as a wedding. In other cases, a woman might go years without immersing her whole body in water.
Perhaps another cup of tea.
Dirt simply rolled off the body along with sweat and was absorbed into the undergarments. It was the undergarments that took on the primary function of maintaining cleanliness, serving as a barrier between the skin and outer clothing. This fact completely overturns our modern understanding of basic hygiene. To care for their hands, women use special whitening paste made from almond bran. They rubbed these into their skin before bed and put on thick gloves over them. In the morning, they washed off the paste with the same cold water from a jug. Hands were expected to remain impeccably white and soft, without a single trace of housework. Even the slightest darkening of the skin on the fingers was considered a sign of bad taste and low birth.
Right here, watch your feet.
Bathrooms began to appear in wealthy homes only toward the end of the century. Until then, copper or tin tubs were brought directly into the bedroom and placed in front of the fireplace. Filling such a tub took several hours and required the coordinated effort of the entire household staff. Water was heated in the kitchen in huge cauldrons and carried upstairs in heavy buckets. It is no surprise that ladies preferred to avoid this complicated and exhausting procedure. Thus, a Victorian lady's morning hygiene routine resembled dusting antique furniture more than a full-fledged bath. Water was used extremely sparingly, and the main focus was on concealing imperfections. This approach to one's own body was shaped over decades by strict social norms. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these standards of cleanliness. Share your thoughts in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new historical investigations. What lies behind the beautiful image of voluminous dresses will forever change your perception of history. A Victorian woman's wardrobe was a complex, multi-layered structure weighing up to 15 kilograms. The very first layer, next to the skin, was always a long cotton or linen chemise. It served the primary hygienic function, absorbing sweat and bodily secretions. The chemise was made of durable fabric capable of withstanding frequent boiling and harsh washing. Over the shirt, a stiff corset was worn, which tightly cinched the waist and rib cage. Corsets were made of thick cotton reinforced with steel plates or whalebone.
Just right, ma'am. Perfect. Thank you.
This garment was never washed, as water would instantly ruin its framework. To prevent the corset from absorbing the smell of sweat, a chemise was always worn between it and the body. Ladies wore corsets every day, removing them only before going to sleep. Special pads were also worn under the corset to give the figure the desired silhouette. These could be small pads on the hips or bolsters to add volume at the back. All these elements made the dress incredibly stuffy and heavy. During the hot summer months, women constantly sweated under layers of thick fabric. It was impossible to air out such clothing, which created the perfect environment for unpleasant odors to develop. To protect collars and cuffs from getting dirty quickly, they were made removable. These small details were washed much more often than the rest of the outfit. A snow-white collar created the illusion of cleanliness for the entire outfit. Maids would sew fresh lace onto their mistresses' dresses every day before they went out in public. This trick saved time and protected expensive fabrics from premature wear. To protect against sweat in the underarm area, special inserts were sewn into the dresses. They were made of several layers of thick cotton or wool, which absorbed moisture well. The inserts were easily detached, washed separately, and sewn back onto the bodice of the dress. This measure was essential, as deodorants simply did not exist at the time. The inserts saved expensive silk fabrics from being ruined by salty sweat droplets. Heavy fabrics and tight lacing severely restricted women's movements. Even a simple walk in the park required considerable physical effort. Due to the lack of oxygen in the tight corset, ladies often breathed shallowly and grew tired quickly. At the slightest physical exertion, the body began to actively release moisture, which remained trapped under layers of clothing. Upon returning home, ladies immediately changed their damp undershirts for dry ones so as not to get cold. The process of dressing and undressing took an enormous amount of time and required outside help. It was impossible to lace up a corset or fasten dozens of small buttons on the back by oneself. Women were completely dependent on their maids for their daily grooming. Clothing served as a kind of armor that isolated the body from the outside environment, yet trapped all odors inside. Victorian fashion prioritized visual aesthetics far above personal comfort and hygiene. Layers of thick fabric reliably concealed the body's true condition from prying eyes. A woman could look flawless in her velvet gown while experiencing terrible discomfort from tightness and sweat. Do you think modern people could endure even a single day in such heavy, stifling attire? Think about that as we move on. In the next chapter, you'll learn why Victorian ladies were afraid to wash their hair more than once a month. A secret passed down from generation to generation hides the true reason for infrequent hair washing. In the 19th century, luxurious long locks were considered the main adornment of any woman. However, washing one's hair the traditional way with soap and water was done, at best, once every few months. Doctors seriously warned that wet hair could cause a severe cold. Drying long, thick strands without a hairdryer took hours, sitting by an open fire. The powder was left on for a while so that it could fully absorb all excess oil. Then the white powder was thoroughly combed out with the same stiff brushes until it was completely gone. This method allowed for a quick refresh of the hairstyle before an important evening outing.
Thank you, Mary.
To give the hair a pleasant scent, special scented pomades were used. Their composition included animal fat mixed with essential oils of rose, lavender, or jasmine. The pomade was rubbed between the palms and applied to the ends of the hair, avoiding the roots. This product helped smooth out unruly strands and hold a complex hairstyle in place all day. Unfortunately, the greasy pomade quickly attracted street dust and soot.
It's everywhere. Oh no.
Elaborate styles featuring numerous braids, hair pieces, and curls were created to last for several days. Women slept in special bonnets to keep their hairstyles from getting messed up overnight. In the morning, the maid would merely adjust any loose strands and add a little setting pomade. Undoing and restyling the hair every day was considered an unacceptable waste of time. Because of this, dust and flakes of dead skin often accumulated inside the tight buns. When the day for washing one's hair finally arrived, it turned into a major event. The water used for washing was softened by adding borax or a small amount of ammonia. A mixture of whipped egg yolks, chamomile tea, and a drop of rum was used as shampoo. They washed their hair over a basin, taking care to thoroughly rinse every strand of accumulated lipstick and powder. They rinsed their hair with water mixed with lemon juice or vinegar to add shine. Drying the hair was a separate and quite tedious process. The lady would sit on a low stool in front of a roaring fireplace and let her wet hair fall loosely over her shoulders. A maid constantly combed the strands with a wide-toothed comb so they would dry faster and not become tangled. In winter, women were forbidden from going outside for 24 hours after washing their hair. The slightest draft on damp hair was considered a deadly threat to health.
I'm afraid.
To curl their hair, they used heavy metal tongs that were heated directly in the fireplace. The temperature of the tongs was tested on a piece of paper. If the paper turned yellow, the metal had to be cooled. Despite these precautions, women often scorched their hair or left burns on their foreheads. Scorched strands were generously coated with oils in the hope of restoring their vitality. Styling tools were kept in special velvet cases on the dressing table. This entire complex grooming system created the visual effect of luxurious, thick hair. Women spent hours combing and styling their hair to meet strict beauty standards. Their hair smelled of heavy floral oils that masked the natural odors of an unwashed body. Appreciate the incredible effort of Victorian women and like this video. Your support helps us create even more interesting historical content for the channel. What experts don't talk about lies in the ingredients of old-fashioned skin cleansers. Since washing with water was considered dangerous, Victorians sought other ways to cleanse their faces of street grime. The most incredible and sometimes harsh chemical compounds were used. Pharmacists created special alcohol-based tinctures that literally dissolved dirt on the skin surface. These products contained a high percentage of alcohol and mercilessly dried out delicate female skin.
Thank you, I'll remember that.
To remove stubborn stains or rough skin on the elbows, they used real pumice. This volcanic rock was ground into fine crumbs and mixed with a rich cream. The resulting scrub was rubbed into the skin with strong pressure to remove the top layer of the epidermis. After such rough mechanical cleansing, the skin turned red and required abundant moisturizing. Ordinary animal fat or unscented petroleum jelly was often used as a moisturizer. Cleansing face masks were made from some rather unexpected ingredients. One of the most popular recipes was a mixture of raw veal, milk, and oatmeal. This paste was applied to the face before bed and left on for several hours. It was believed that the meat juice lightened the skin and smoothed out fine lines. These masks had to be washed off using the same damp sponges, as water was always in short supply in the bedroom. Sometimes water in which oats or barley had been boiled was used for washing. This starchy broth did indeed have softening properties and soothed irritated skin. However, it had to be prepared every day, as without a refrigerator, the broth quickly soured. Maids in the kitchen would simmer grains for hours to obtain the coveted cloudy liquid for the mistress's morning routine. It was one of the safest and gentlest skincare methods of the time. There were also downright strange ways to get rid of freckles. Freckles were considered a sign of commoners working under the scorching sun in the fields. To remove them, aristocratic women rubbed their faces with fresh lemon juice mixed with sugar. This acidic mixture acted as a chemical peel, causing severe skin peeling. Women endured the burning and discomfort in order to achieve an aristocratic pallor. Astringent toners were made from strong black tea or oak bark. The astringent properties of these plants help make the skin more matte and smooth to the touch. The liquid was applied to the face using soft cotton pads and left on until completely dry. Afterward, the face was heavily powdered to permanently set the matte effect. The powder settled in a thick layer, clogging the pores and creating the effect of a porcelain mask. Special products were needed to remove the thick layer of makeup at the end of the day. A regular damp cloth couldn't handle the mixture of wax, oil, and colored pigments. Therefore, women used so-called cold creams made from wax and rose water. The cream was applied to the face in a thick layer. It dissolved the makeup, after which everything was wiped off with a dry towel. The cleansing procedure took no less time than the process of applying makeup. Maintaining cleanliness without the convenience of running water turned into an endless battle against dirt and one's own body. The skin was subjected to constant stress from harsh cleansers and a lack of proper hydration. Do you know how often modern dermatologists recommend washing your face with regular soap? The answer to this question lies in understanding the balance of our skin. And in the next chapter, you'll learn about the invisible threat that residents of big cities faced every time they stepped outside. Nineteenth-century London was a vast industrial hub, constantly shrouded in thick smoke. Thousands of factories and plants spewed tons of coal, soot, and toxic gases into the atmosphere every day. Residential homes were also heated exclusively with coal, the smoke from which billowed from every chimney. As a result, the city was blanketed by the famous London smog, thick, sticky, and incredibly dirty. This smog settled on the streets, houses, and passers-by's clothing as a thick layer of gray soot. For a woman, going outside became a real test of her outfit's cleanliness. If she ran a hand across her face after an hour-long walk, a black smudge remained on her fingers. Soot clogged the folds of her clothes, settled on her hats, and seeped through the lace of her collars. Breathing this air was difficult. It caused constant coughing and watery eyes. The urban environment was utterly hostile to any semblance of freshness or cleanliness. To protect their faces from flying soot, ladies used thick veils. They attached them to the brims of their hats and pulled them down over their faces at the slightest gust of wind. The veil acted as a primitive filter, trapping the largest particles of dust and dirt. By the end of the day, the veil's fabric would be completely black and required immediate washing. Wearing white clothes outdoors was considered the height of impracticality and folly. For walks, they chose dresses in dark shades: brown, dark green, or burgundy. On such fabrics, gray coal dust was less noticeable to the eye. The hems of skirts were often hemmed with a special stiff braid so that the fabric would not wear out so quickly against the dirty cobblestones. This braid collected street dirt, much like a broom sweeping the sidewalk. Upon returning home, maids would first brush the dirt off this very lower edge of the dress. Sun umbrellas served to protect not only from sunburn, but also from soot falling from above. On windless days, black ash literally rained down from the sky in large flakes. An open umbrella created a small, clean dome over its owner's head. The fabric of the umbrellas was treated with special compounds so that the soot could be easily brushed off. Walking through an industrial city without an umbrella or a hat was absolutely unthinkable for a respectable lady. Inside homes, the air quality was little better than on the street. Coal-fired fireplaces regularly sent smoke into the rooms, leaving a layer of soot on the furniture and curtains. Maids spent hours wiping black dust from polished surfaces and mirrors. They tried to keep the windows tightly shut to keep the street smog from getting inside. However, soot seeped through the tiniest cracks in the frames and settled on the snow-white sheets. To clean carpets and heavy curtains, they used damp sawdust or old tea leaves. These were scattered across the floor before sweeping to prevent dust from rising into the air. The damp particles bound the soot, after which they were carefully swept into a dustpan with a broom. It was hard physical labor that had to be performed almost every day. Cleanliness in the home was maintained at the cost of incredible effort, by an entire staff of domestic servants. The polluted air directly affected the condition of the skin on the faces and bodies of city women. Pores were constantly clogged with sticky coal dust, causing inflammation and a dull complexion. Those very harsh alcohol-based toners were a necessary measure to combat this specific type of grime. Plain water could not dissolve the oily soot that clung to the skin. Women had to choose between dry, parched skin and a dirty face. Hair suffered particularly from urban smog, as it was impossible to hide it completely. Soot settled on hair pomade, turning the hairstyle into a sticky, dark mass. That is why brushing the hair with a stiff brush became the main daily ritual. The brush physically scraped the caked-on soot from every strand, restoring the hair to relative cleanliness. The dirty brushes were then washed in soapy water and dried in front of the fireplace until the following evening. The Victorian era was a time of a massive industrial boom, for which the environment had to pay the price. Cities turned into machines producing dirt on an industrial scale. Women of that time were in a constant, silent war with soot, which permeated every corner of their lives. Maintaining the illusion of cleanliness under such conditions required incredible ingenuity and discipline. Their entire lives were governed by a strict schedule for cleansing their clothes, bodies, and homes from the consequences of technological progress. Here is what happens behind the closed doors of boudoir during those special days. The topic of female physiology was the strictest taboo in Victorian society. These processes were not discussed aloud, even with the closest female relatives or doctors. Women were expected to behave as if their bodies had no natural cycles. All hygiene procedures related to this period were carried out in the deepest secrecy from the male members of the household. The disposable hygiene products we are accustomed to today did not exist at that time. Instead, they used pieces of old cotton or linen fabric, folded into several layers. They were attached to a special belt around the waist using pins or ties. The design was bulky, uncomfortable, and often shifted when walking quickly. Ladies had to move very smoothly and carefully to avoid awkward situations. Washing these reusable cloth pads turned into a veritable secret operation. Handing them over to laundresses along with the rest of the laundry was considered the height of indecency. Women washed them themselves in their rooms, using a basin of water and soap. The washed cloths were dried out of sight, hidden under towels or dried at night in front of the fireplace. This process required constant vigilance to ensure that none of the male servants accidentally noticed these items. Because these methods of protection were so unreliable, women preferred to stay home during their periods. They would cancel visits, parties, and long walks, citing a slight illness or a migraine as an excuse. Dark clothing once again came to the rescue, helping to conceal any unexpected issues. They wore additional thick underskirts in dark colors under their dresses. All this elaborate camouflage created enormous psychological stress. Doctors of that time had a very vague understanding of the female body. They advised women during this period to completely avoid physical and mental exertion. It was believed that reading complex books or engaging in vigorous activity could cause irreparable harm to one's health. Women were prescribed bed rest and maximum tranquility in a dimly lit room. Any deviation from the norm was treated with warm compresses or tinctures made from soothing herbs. Odor was also a serious problem that had to be addressed with available methods. Since proper bathing remained prohibited, ladies used strong perfumes. The hem of the dress and the petticoats were generously sprayed with perfumes, featuring heavy scents of musk or rose. Small pouches filled with dried aromatic herbs were often worn at the waist. These measures were intended to mask any natural body odors. Interestingly, pharmacies did not begin selling the first commercial products for these purposes until the end of the century. These were special belts and more comfortable fabric inserts that could be purchased anonymously. However, they were too expensive for most ordinary city women. Therefore, old fabric scraps continued to be used in most families for a very long time. The tradition of making hygiene products at home was passed down from mother to daughter. The discomfort of wearing heavy dresses and tight belts was a constant companion in women's lives. Added to this was the need to hide their condition from society with a smile on their faces. The ideal Victorian lady was not supposed to show either fatigue or irritation. She was obliged to remain a gracious hostess, even when experiencing severe physical discomfort. It was a true feat of self-control, elevated to an absolute. This entire sphere of life was shrouded in myths, prejudices, and false shame. A lack of knowledge about their own bodies left women vulnerable in the face of any problems. They coped with difficulties alone, unable to discuss them openly even with a doctor. Only a few medical treatises attempted to shed light on these issues, but they were accessible to only a select few. Most women relied exclusively on the advice of older female relatives. The secret side of women's hygiene is a striking example of how society ignored basic human needs. Comfort was sacrificed to strict rules of propriety and morality. How much do you think such secrets affected people's psychological well-being? The question of how they coped with stress remains open to historians. And in the next chapter, you'll learn what Victorians used to brush their teeth when modern toothpaste was nowhere to be found.
I feared as much. What will we do?
Oral care in the Victorian era was no less of a challenge than washing the body. The concept of bacteria did not yet exist, but people fully understood the importance of clean teeth for fresh breath. The main cleaning tool was a brush with bristles made of pig hair or badger hair. Such brushes were quite stiff and often injured the gums if used carelessly. Brush handles were carved from bone, wood, or ivory for wealthy customers. Instead of the minty toothpaste we are familiar with, Victorians used coarse tooth powders. The main ingredient in most of these powders was ordinary ground chalk. The chalk acted as an abrasive, physically scraping plaque off the tooth enamel. Eggshells ground into a fine powder or even finely crushed brick were often added to the chalk. Brushing with these mixtures was more like polishing metal with sandpaper. One of the most popular recipes was a powder containing charcoal or soot. Charcoal absorbed odors well and had a mild whitening effect. To mask the unpleasant taste of chalk and soot, peppermint or clove essential oils were dripped into the mixture. Wealthy people bought ready-made powders in beautiful porcelain jars at pharmacies. The poor, however, simply took ash from the stove and rubbed their teeth with it using a finger or a piece of cloth. Various alcohol or water-based tinctures were used for mouth rinsing. Solutions containing camphor, myrrh, or rose water were very popular. These liquids left a strong medicinal aftertaste in the mouth, which temporarily masked bad breath. Doctors also advised rinsing the mouth with salt water after every meal. It was believed that salt strengthened the gums and prevented tooth loosening. Toothpicks were an essential accessory for both men's and women's toiletries. They were made from goose feathers, silver, or gold, decorated with carvings, and carried in special cases. Using a toothpick at the table was considered improper. It was done in private after a meal. Thoroughly removing food debris from between the teeth was the main way to prevent bad breath. In the absence of modern dentistry, this was the only way to keep teeth intact for as long as possible. If a tooth did start to ache, remedies were extremely limited. Apothecaries offered special drops made from opium or cocaine, which simply numbed the pain. These drops were applied to a piece of cotton and placed directly into the cavity. At that time, people did not yet know how to treat teeth in the modern sense. They were mostly extracted. The extraction procedure was performed without anesthesia, using ordinary forceps, and was incredibly painful. To avoid seeing a dentist, people resorted to the most absurd folk remedies. Some applied hot baked onions or pouches of heated sand to the sore cheek. Others tried to charm away the pain or used various magical amulets. Keeping all one's teeth into adulthood was considered a great stroke of luck and a rarity. Many aristocrats already had dentures made of wood or bone by the age of 30.
Just tell me what to do.
Artificial teeth were attached to the gums using gold wires or springs. Such dentures were very uncomfortable. They rubbed against the mucous membrane and often fell out while eating or talking. Artificial dentures had to be cleaned even more thoroughly than real teeth. They were soaked overnight in special solutions to remove food debris and odors, hiding the fact that one wore dentures was a matter of honor for any self-respecting woman. Sugar, which became widely available to the general population, dealt a massive blow to dental health. Victorians adored sweets, candies, candied fruits, and sweet tea were found in every home. At the same time, hygiene practices simply couldn't keep up with changes in the diet. Harsh abrasive powders wore away the enamel, making teeth even more vulnerable to cavities. A beautiful snow-white smile was the exception, rather than the rule in that era. Thus, dental care was a painful, rough, and not always effective process. Powders made from soot and chalk merely scratched the surface, creating a temporary illusion of cleanliness. Behind the dazzling smiles and formal portraits often lay serious oral health problems. People spent vast sums on perfume to mask the odor they couldn't eliminate through brushing. This was yet another facet of Victorian reality, where outward appearance mattered more than inner health.
Perhaps something pink tonight.
In an era when bathing was a rare occurrence, fragrances became the primary weapon in the battle for propriety. Perfumes and toilet waters were used not to attract attention, but simply to mask body odors.
Believe it.
Victorian women doused themselves with bottles of floral extracts every day. The most popular scents were single-note fragrances: lavender, violet, rose, and orange blossom. Scents that were too heavy, oriental, or musky were considered a sign of women of loose morals. Perfume was applied not only to the skin, but also to all items of clothing. Tiny pouches filled with dried rose petals or lavender were sewn into the hem of dresses. These sachets released a light fragrance as the wearer walked, creating a cloud of pleasant scent around her. Sachets filled with herbs were also placed in wardrobes and dressers among stacks of undergarments. This was an attempt to prevent musty odors from developing in clothes that were rarely washed. Special attention was paid to scenting handkerchiefs, which were an essential accessory. A handkerchief wasn't just for wiping one's nose, it served as a portable air filter. When on a dirty street or in a stuffy room, a woman would hold a scented handkerchief to her face. This helped her breathe in a floral scent instead of the smell of unwashed bodies and horse manure from the pavement. Handkerchiefs were generously soaked in cologne as early as the morning, so the scent would last all day. Sniffing salts were a real lifesaver in crowded ballrooms. In tight corsets and heavy dresses, women often fainted from the stuffiness and the jumble of pungent odors. Small vials of ammonia salts were always kept in a handbag or a dress pocket. The sharp chemical smell instantly brought them to their senses and cleared their minds. The use of smelling salts was so common that it came to be seen as a sign of feminine refinement. To give their hair a pleasant scent, they used special incense burners. Aromatic resins or dried herbs were burned in them, and the woman would sit nearby with her hair down. The smoke infused the strands with the scent of incense or pine needles, which lingered for several days. This method was considered more refined than using heavy, greasy hair pomades. However, the procedure was a fire hazard and required constant supervision by a maid. In homes, unpleasant odors were also constantly combated with fragrances. Water for washing floors was mixed with drops of essential oils or wormwood decoction. Dry apple peels or rosemary sprigs were burned in fireplaces to freshen the air in the living room. Vases of strongly scented cut flowers were placed on the tables and changed every day. All these measures created a dense, heady, aromatic atmosphere inside the mansions. Interestingly, the use of perfume was strictly regulated by rules of etiquette. Young unmarried women were allowed to use only the lightest, barely perceptible floral waters.
How is it?
Married women were permitted to wear more complex fragrances with notes of jasmine or sandalwood. Widows were not allowed to wear perfume at all during the mourning period, limiting themselves to the scent of plain soap. Violating these rules could lead to severe social censure. Making homemade perfumes was a popular hobby among wealthy women. Special recipe books describe methods for distilling floral water from petals gathered in the garden. Small copper stills were used for this purpose and were set up right in the kitchen. Homemade toilet waters were stored in tightly sealed dark bottles in a cool place. Creating one's own unique fragrance was considered a source of pride for the lady of the house. Men also actively used perfumes, preferring scents of citrus, tobacco, or leather. They applied cologne liberally to their faces after shaving to soothe the skin and mask the smell of sweat. The liberal use of perfume by men was not considered objectionable. On the contrary, a fine scent was a sign of a gentleman's status and financial prosperity. It was a time when scents served as social markers, dividing people into classes. Fragrant masking was a necessity for survival in a society where bathing was a rarity. Perfume served a sanitary function, creating a barrier between the person and the environment. Floral extracts and snuff salts helped people ignore a reality devoid of deodorants and running water. Women spent fortunes on bottles of perfume to live up to the image of a fragrant rose. But behind this sweet facade lay the harsh and far from fragrant reality of everyday life. While aristocratic women worried about fragrances, someone had to wash those very undershirts that absorbed the dirt. Laundry day in a Victorian home was the hardest day of the week, usually Monday. The process began long before dawn, with lighting a fire under huge copper cauldrons to boil water. Laundresses, often hired specifically for this day, worked in damp and dimly lit basements. This work required immense physical strength and incredible endurance in conditions of terrible humidity. The laundry was first soaked overnight in a soapy solution or a special lye made from wood ash. In the morning, the main washing began, which was heavy manual labor. The wet, heavy fabrics were rubbed against ribbed wooden washboards until the skin on their hands was worn away. The caustic lye corroded the laundress's hands, leaving deep cracks and chemical burns. The women stood knee-deep in soapy water, inhaling hot steam that made it hard to breathe. After thorough scrubbing, the laundry was sent to boil in those very same huge copper cauldrons. The laundresses constantly stirred the boiling mass with long wooden tongs or sticks. Boiling was necessary to kill parasites and remove deeply ingrained sweat stains. This was a dangerous stage of the work. An accidental movement could cause the cauldron of boiling water to tip over. The air in the laundry room became unbearably hot and stifling, like in a tropical forest. To give the laundry a snow-white color, they used bluing, a special blue powder. It was added to the water during the final rinse to neutralize the yellowish tint of washed cotton. It was important not to overdo it with the powder, otherwise the shirts would turn distinctly blue. Bleaching powder was also used for whitening, and its smell permeated the entire laundry room. These chemicals were toxic and slowly destroyed the fabric fibers with frequent washing. Laundry was wrung out by hand or using primitive mechanical rollers. Passing heavy, wet sheets through the rollers required the considerable effort of two people. Water dripped onto the floor, turning it into a slippery rink where it was easy to fall. After wringing, the laundry was placed in baskets and carried out to dry in the yard or in the attic. In winter, drying became a nightmare. The laundry froze on the lines and stood stiff as a board, like plywood. Ironing was no less of an exhausting process, completing the laundry cycle. Cast iron irons were heated directly on the kitchen stove or filled with hot coals from the fireplace. The irons were incredibly heavy, and swinging them around for several hours straight was equivalent to a workout with dumbbells. The iron's temperature was checked by spitting on the metal. If the saliva bounced off, the iron was ready for use. One wrong move could burn a hole in the delicate fabric or leave a rusty stain on the collar. To ensure collars and cuffs stood up straight, they were heavily starched before ironing. The starch was made from potatoes or wheat, turning it into a thick, sticky paste. Garment parts were dipped into this solution, dried, and then ironed with a hot iron until stiff. Stiff collars dug into the neck and caused a great deal of discomfort when worn. However, a perfectly smooth and stiff collar was the main symbol of a gentleman's or lady's impeccable cleanliness. The work of laundresses was among the lowest paid and most despised in Victorian society. These women aged prematurely due to harsh working conditions, constant dampness, and exposure to chemicals. Their hands were red, swollen, and disfigured by arthritis from constantly being in icy water. Despite this, the profession of laundress was the only way for many widows and single women to survive. They ensured the cleanliness of the upper classes at the cost of their own health and youth. In wealthy homes, laundry could take several days, employing an entire army of servants. The enormous amount of linens, tablecloths, and personal items required the laundry to operate non-stop. The smell of boiling soap and bleach hung constantly in the basements of the mansions, contrasting with the sense of perfume upstairs. The lady of the house would only occasionally go downstairs to check the quality of the washed lace. All this dirty underbelly of life was reliably hidden from the eyes of guests and the household's owners. Laundry in the Victorian era was not merely a household chore, but a veritable industrial process in miniature. It required complex logistics, heavy manual labor, and the use of hazardous substances. A clean cotton chemise, hidden beneath a velvet dress, cost hours of backbreaking labor in a soapy steam. This contrast between the gleaming facade and the dark underside perfectly characterizes the entire era. Beauty and cleanliness always relied on the invisible but exhausting labor of others. The primary standard of female beauty in Victorian England was a sickly, almost translucent pallor. A tan was associated exclusively with the working class, who spent their days in the fields or at the market. A true lady was expected to look as if she had never left the confines of her home. This aesthetic of pallor compelled women to avoid the sun by any means necessary. In the summer, they covered their windows with thick curtains and went outside only under the protection of wide-brimmed hats and parasols. To achieve the ideal skin tone, highly questionable and dangerous cosmetics were used. The most popular powder was a mixture based on lead white, which produced an even white color. Lead slowly accumulated in the body, causing chronic poisoning and damaging the nervous system. The skin quickly withered from such makeup, became covered with gray spots, and required an increasingly thick layer of powder. Women found themselves in a vicious cycle, trying to hide the consequences of using toxic cosmetics with more of the same. Another common ingredient in cosmetics was arsenic, which was added to facial lotions. It was believed that arsenic baths gave the face a fresh look and smoothed out minor skin imperfections. Regular use of such products led to serious stomach problems and hair loss. However, magazine advertisements persistently touted the miraculous properties of these toxic formulations. For the sake of beauty, women were willing to turn a blind eye to the obvious side effects and risks. Belladonna drops were used to give the eyes a feverish gleam and dilate the pupils. The extract of this poisonous plant did indeed make the gaze deep and expressive. Unfortunately, frequent use of the drops led to deteriorating vision and even complete blindness. The eyes became extremely sensitive to light, forcing women to constantly wear dark veils. Beauty demanded sacrifices in the most literal and physical sense of the word. Lips and cheeks were tinted with cinnabar, a pigment based on mercury sulfide. The bright red pigment against the backdrop of leaden pallor created the effect of a dramatic, almost theatrical appearance. Mercury penetrating the skin caused poisoning, tremors in the hands, and dental problems. Cosmetics literally poisoned their wearers, but giving them up meant falling out of high society. The only alternative was beet juice, which was considered the lot of the poor and quickly washed off the lips. To emphasize the skin's translucency, thin blue veins were drawn over the powder. For this, a blue pencil or paint was used, carefully tracing lines on the temples and neck. This created the illusion that the skin was so thin that blood vessels could be seen through it. Such makeup made a woman appear fragile, defenseless, and incredibly refined by the standards of the time. This entire aesthetic celebrated physical frailty as the primary hallmark of aristocracy. Removing the makeup in the evening was a separate ordeal for the skin. Toxic pigments deeply embedded themselves in the pores, mixing with street soot and sebum. Ladies had to scrub their faces with rough sponges and soapy water to wash off the lead-based mask. The skin responded to this abuse with redness, flaking, and premature wrinkles. The next morning, the process repeated itself. A thick layer of white powder once again covered the weary face, concealing imperfections. The quest for paleness extended not only to the face but also to the hands and décolletage. In the evening, exposed areas of the body were generously coated with whitening creams based on the same lead. Ladies slept in gloves soaked in special compounds to keep the skin on their hands soft and white. Sunbathing was considered strictly forbidden, which led to vitamin deficiencies and rickets. The ideal Victorian lady resembled a beautiful porcelain doll, fragile and sickly. Doctors often prescribed iron supplements to combat anemia, which was widespread. However, these pills only slightly improved their well-being without changing their overall lifestyle. Women continued to wear tight corsets, breathe in coal smoke, and apply poisons to their faces. Social standards proved stronger than common sense and the instinct for self-preservation. Being healthy and rosy-cheeked was simply considered improper for a woman of high society. Toxic cosmetics became the logical culmination of the entire Victorian hygiene system. When water is unavailable or considered dangerous, visual concealment takes center stage. The era that gave us railroads and steamships was surprisingly ignorant when it came to human biology. The myth of beautiful ladies in luxurious dresses shatters against the harsh reality of lead-based powders and unwashed bodies. It was a life of constant compromise between the desire to look perfect and the impossibility of being clean.
The burden of appearances.
We have examined only a small fraction of the incredible difficulties faced by women of the Victorian era. Behind every flawless portrait lay a daily, exhausting struggle against dirt, odors, and strict social norms. Exploring these everyday details allows us to take off our rose-colored glasses and see history without embellishment. Let us know in the comments what other topics about daily life and the hidden aspects of past eras you'd like to see in our next videos. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new, fascinating historical investigations.